Sunday morning.
We're 40 Sunday mornings out from normal, and the world is not the same. Said you waited for a warning, but the warning never came. Don't shine a light in my face.
Nancy gonna cut you a check too late. 2 years after your funeral's paid, 2 years after the grave, she'll be a little stronger for all of the dollars she saved. Watching you wake, watching you cling to your family slipping away. Watch her do nothing but pray. Watch her condemn the Republicans, take them to brunch and then shrug it away. Now watch us be outraged half of a day, then pick a new hero to face our leaders and think they could beat them, playing the game they played since Pelosi had real human blood in her veins. They're all one and the same, sold off stocks and they all maintain that the risk was benign and the virus was tame. Flash forward and 40 Sunday mornings fade, 250,000 people in its wake, and the cruise ship sailed today. So motherfucker, don't shine a light in my face. Wait.
Good morning. Sunday morning. Good morning.
Wait.
Sunday morning.
We're 40 Sunday mornings out from normal, and the world is not the same. Said you waited for a warning, but the warning never came. Don't shine a light in my face. Said you waited for a warning, but the warning never.
Read my lips, brand new taxes, starving all the billionaires and neutering their Visa Maxes. Topple Congress off their axis, mobilize the homeless, give them axes, call it praxis. Chop a couple limbs off the legislative branches, we'll show you the difference between air as a human right and guaranteed oxygen access. Octogenarians who barely know what day it is are culling countless citizens while sitting on a dais made of ignorance that was built on the graves of the slaves made to labor for its self-declared significance. And all to build a Congress full of millionaires who make their fortunes insider trading while they shit on all the indigent. So I got a bone to pick with our leaders, and I'll start with the ligaments. Pick right through the muscle, dig the marrow out, and serve it to the unhoused millions living in their minivans or watching their belongings get evicted from their tenement. I have a dream where we breach the walls of Congress and just let them in. And what happens next will survive in only text, cause there won't be any evidence. There will only be that heavy kind of feeling that pervades a space where there has been a reckoning and you can feel its remnants. Let any man who enters seeking power know that those who came before him suffocated on their eminence. That there once was a seal on the wall, but we quartered it and scattered all the pieces that it might prevent its semblance. And so we end the great experiment. We'll take all your billions, leave you 2 coins for the ferryman. Leave you drifting on a Dutchman floating derelict among the wretched seraphim. For holy is the hand that wiped the land clean of those who pose as gentlemen. That's my time, honey, cue the thunderclap and strike the theremin. And so we end the great experiment. Give you 2 coins for the ferryman.
I think I liked it better being blind, when I couldn't read between the lines, and when I couldn't see the cracks in the structure that lay bare before me the whole time. I think I liked it better back when I suspended disbelief and swallowed pride. I thought I knew the difference in the red from the blue, but they both bleed us so dry. They both bleed us so dry.
My favorite songs don't hit the same way. I get to the end of a 4-minute track and I'm only looking back thinking, what did they actually say? So I try to sit down with my wife and watch TV, but I just see propaganda elevating the police in the simplest of sitcom banter, and tiny little altars full of offerings to corporate masters in every well-planned wide pan shot of the name brand stocking up the pantry. Pull back one long tracking shot out to the garage to the logo on the Camry. Nice tight shot of the Camry, close-up view of the Camry, slow pan up on the Camry, long slow zoom to the unmoving human who's up in the front with the tube pumping fumes to him straight from the back of the Camry. Ashamed he just could not provide for himself, let alone for his family. It's a blue pill mindset that spent 2020 making dance beats.
I think I liked it better being blind, when I couldn't read between the lines, and when I couldn't see the cracks in the structure that lay bare before me the whole time. I think I liked it better back when I suspended disbelief and swallowed pride, and thought I knew the difference in the red from the blue, but they both bleed us so dry. They both bleed us so dry.
Ignorance is bliss, which explains why a lot of us are so fucking happy. Quick to take the trip for all its trappings. Never one to ask what's up, what's going on, or God forbid what's happening. A lot of us would strap into the ride and then spit right in the eye of the guy whose job it is to snap your fastenings. But maybe we're all born with that capacity. Maybe each of us comes standard with humor, compassion, malice, and audacity. Some of us are blind to the system, but some see it fine and say this is how it has to be. Some of us can stare wide-eyed at a nationwide human catastrophe and only offer platitudes and recipes. And I wish that I could tell myself that nothing's worth obsessing past my everyday necessities. I wish that I could cry fake news over anything that threatened me, tune out our abuses and consume a little levity. Wish that I could offer up my son a smoother destiny. Wish I had some better lessons for how best to answer questions for the things I've been perpetually questioning. But I'm too busy looking at our leaders, wondering what I might be missing from their messaging. Trying to find the reasoning to let 250,000 people meet an early reckoning. And even though I know the truth, it's hard to swallow something that's so literally sickening. Hope is ever dwindling, COVID ever beckoning. Winter slows your breathing, but your pulse is ever quickening. Even though I know the truth, it's hard to keep listening. I'm done with my epiphany, my innocence is blistering. I'd like to think I'd taste the earth before I'd ever kiss the ring. Hard to speak the truth and harder still to keep listening.
Sometimes I think I miss being blind, when I couldn't read between the lines, and when I couldn't see the cracks in the structure that lay bare before me the whole time. I think I liked it better back when I suspended disbelief and swallowed pride. Thought I knew the difference in the red from the blue, but they both bleed us so dry. Both bleed us so dry. Both bleed us so dry. They both bleed us so dry.
Legend says that Hercules swept Cerberus right off his feet and effortlessly set him down softly as a songbird. Atlas kept the world upon his back and every day wondered whether he could stand it any longer. And Tara Reade came out to say the man they tried to label the messiah of morality was really just another rapist. And I don't intend to hesitate when asked who was the stronger. Tara, like Assange, knew that carrying the truth would be the hardest labor. Tara knew that her assailant wasn't gonna make us any safer, and knew he's just the type of man to hand a decent foreign leader US printed walking papers, and knew he'd be relentless and aggressive in the war he'd wage upon her very character, that his attempts to weaken and degrade and embarrass her would be her only compensation. But I strongly doubt that anyone could ever have foreseen the stream of hate that came from quote-unquote progressives and the self-styled titans of survivor advocation. So if you really think there's something to be gained out of sharing your pain with the world, you are sorely mistaken. The Biden team just dragged their feet addressing Tara's allegations until they had a decent list of smears, then they aired them out on every station. And it turns out no one wants to hear the truth of who they praised as being worthy of such bloated liberal celebration. That no one wants to really know the person they've so valiantly defended, even when it meant they had to gloat and shit all over someone braver than they'd be if given the occasion. Now cue the faceless comment squad invasion. Cue those fuckers crawling out the woodwork to come analyze the way you wore your hair and what you wear. Like your appearance waives your rights, or that somehow you're the reason for your situation. Somehow they've decided you should bear responsibility for what such monstrous men insist on doing. Somehow they're deluded by the empty, hypocritical, and useless fucking platitudes that bastard keeps on spewing. And I think it's very telling that the best of their excuses when they try to come and justify our president's abuses is a hearty butt Trump. In which case I'll remind you that you never saw the news attempt to sell us Donald Trump like he was morally upstanding or a decent human. But when Joe says something bigoted or ogles someone's little kid, CNN says, "Isn't this refreshing? Biden's like a mix of JFK and FDR."
Back, everyone, and thanks for those of you that joined me earlier. And I'm back with another live stream with a really special guest who is running for the U.S. Senate for the Green Party, Matthew Hoh. Thank you so much for joining us and being on Politics of Survival. And yeah, welcome. Welcome.
Yeah.
You've got a lot going on. So, I wanted to kind of just start in and just kind of tell our listeners, who you are and what you're running for in your district, and then we'll get into what happened.
Sure. Thanks for having me here, Tara. I'm Matthew Hoh, running as a Green Party candidate for the U.S. Senate in North Carolina. I'm a disabled Marine Corps combat veteran. Have done a lot of anti-war and human rights work over the last 12 years. And in the past year, entered into politics as a first-time political candidate with the North Carolina Green Party. This past year, we've had to get onto the ballot, and we just had a very overtly brazen partisan decision handed down by the State Board of Elections that denied us our place on the ballot, even though we fulfilled all the requirements necessary to be on the ballot. And so that's obviously, I think, what we're going to talk about tonight.
Well, take me a step back here. How can they just take you off the ballot with no reasoning? What did they even give, like some sort of reasoning, or is that?
They gave incredibly specious reasoning that just lacks evidence, lacks any sense or rationale. And I'll back it up. So to get on the ballot, to become a recognized political party in North Carolina, we needed 13,865 signatures. We collected 22,500 signatures, and of those, 15,953 were verified by the county boards of elections as valid signatures. So we surpassed the total needed by nearly 2,100, 2,088 to be exact. We turned all our signatures in on time, first by the May 17 deadline in the county, and then by the June 1st deadline to the state. The state has an obligation to immediately and forthwith, according to state statute, certify us as a political party after the counties have verified the signatures and we've attained a threshold needed to be reached. The State Board of Elections received the signatures on June 1st. They held on to them for 30 days. They began an investigation because there were some issues with a very small number of signatures, none of which had ever been validated, so never counted towards the total we needed to reach our goal, attain that threshold, be certified. And on the very last day that it was possible for them to certify us, because there's also a July 1st deadline by state statute that we have to have a nominating convention by and register as Greens and file for candidacy. So on June 30th, the State Board of Elections finally met, the 5 board members, 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and along partisan lines. And again, I mean, I keep coming back to saying brazen because it was shocking how overtly partisan this was and how orchestrated it was. The State Board of Elections voted 3-2 along partisan lines to not certify us as a political party and, basically ignore the fact that we had met all the requirements, done everything procedurally correct, met all the deadlines, et cetera. But because they perceived us as a threat, they chose not to certify us.
They being Justice Democrats, who is they?
Right, just the Democrats, the 3 Democrats on the Board of Elections. The 2 Republicans voted in favor of us. Their argument was that because there were these minor and again, amounting to, as far as we know, we have been told about 200 signatures that they were concerned about that had issues. And we've worked with them for the last 30 days. We've worked very closely with the State Board of Elections investigators trying to help them because we were defrauded too. We had some people who turned in some signatures looking to kind of scam the system, right, and earn some money that way that were fraudulent. And so we as soon as we were made aware of it, we cooperated fully. And again, you're talking about well less than 1% of the signatures we turned in, and signatures that the counties had identified right away as forgeries or as frauds or as not valid or whatever you want to call it, plus a handful of other odds and ends that accounted, as far as we know, for no more than literally a handful of signatures out of 22,500 signatures. So what the State Board of Elections said, what the Democrats said, was that because there are these issues, there could potentially be more issues. And so we need more time to investigate. But since the deadline is tomorrow. There is no more time to investigate. So we are not going to certify you because we are uncertain as to the integrity of the process. And of course, people I think are saying, isn't this kind of like what the Republicans were doing, saying that there was issues of fraud without providing any evidence? You know, and it's exactly what happened. We were denied, you know, among other things, due process at the certification hearing when our attorney asked the chair of the State Board of Elections, Mr. Chair, do these, what you're talking about, your concerns, do they in any way affect the verified signatures? Again, the signatures that count towards our certification. And he refused to answer. He said that this is a criminal investigation, which it's not a criminal investigation, but he said it was a criminal investigation in order to not answer our attorney's question. And then when our attorney tried to follow up, he was shouted down by the chair and his microphone was muted. And then the vote, this is on video. People can go to the State Board of Elections website and watch this. You can find it on our Twitter page. It's clipped out, you know, but that's why I keep going back to brazen. Look, we knew that we were going to run into things like this. Like when you wade into the alligator pond, you're going to get bit. You know what I mean? Like, but how shocking, how overt it was. Just the smugness, the arrogance, the kind of, we're going to do this and what are you going to do about it attitude that we received. So we're in a position now where, of course, we're going to do something about it. If people think that we're just going to accept this, that we're just going to say, oh, no, they failed to certify us and, oh, I guess we'll try next year. You know, they're completely wrong about that.
Well, you know, what comes to mind is, and I'd mentioned to you before we were on air that I had talked to Angela Walker last year, and I'm hearing some parallels. What are the parallels for you? This is you're earlier on in the process, but theirs happened in Pennsylvania. What are you seeing? And is this coming from the Democratic National Committee? Can you say, is this coming from the top?
Yeah, you know, there's another aspect of this that about 2 weeks ago, we became aware that people who had signed our petition were being contacted by phone and then by text by people who were asking them to confirm whether or not they had signed the petition, but then going into a political pitch about how you should remove your name from the petition because this is going to help Republicans and that abortion is in the balance and the Green Party will cost Democrats the election and that, you know, the best thing for you to do, unless you want to be the one, now I'm paraphrasing, but unless you want to be the one who is the reason why we don't have abortion anymore, you need to remove your name from this petition. Now, people were receiving these phone calls 5-6 times a day. Then the text messages started showing up. What we understood, what we came to discover, and what we have audio recordings are that these callers were not identifying themselves as with the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, who were the people behind it. At times they would identify them that way, but other times they would say they were with the Green Party. So they were calling.
That's fraud.
And exactly, calling and clearly and deliberately misrepresenting themselves in a calculated manner in order to get people to pull their names off the petitions. And we have audio of this. What also started happening is that they started showing up at people's homes. So people would come to people's doors, including people who had answered the phone and say, no, I don't want my name off the list, or had responded back on text, no, I don't want my name off of the petition. They would then show up at people's doors and they would say things such as, you know, we're with the Green Party. Sometimes they would identify themselves as being with the Democratic Party. Other times we understand they identified themselves with the State Board of Elections. You know, and they would say things when they would identify themselves as the Green Party, what they would say, or they would say things, as far as we know, as we can understand it, as people have reported to us, they would say things like, it's okay to take your name off the petition because the Green Party is already on the ballot. So this is not going to hurt the Green Party. It was a very convoluted argument that confused people. And that's why people had started calling us saying, what's going on here? Why are you calling us to take our names off of your petition? And we were saying, we're not calling you to do that. And as we learned, and where this really starts to be well understood for people who follow this is that you see this is the Elias Law Group. So this is the Mark Elias, who was the general counsel for John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris. People, if you're not familiar with him, please just Google his name, read his Wikipedia profile. He is arguably the most prominent Democratic attorney in the nation. And this type of suppression and attack on the Green Party, what we're experiencing here in North Carolina, Mark Elias perfected this when he was John Kerry's general counsel in 2004 against the Green Party, and particularly against Ralph Nader's campaign in 2004. Right. So, there's a history to this. They know what they're doing. It's usually quite effective, and it causes, it doesn't just cause angst now. It causes angst in the future. It gives people doubt as to whether or not they want to participate something in the future, whether it's signing or actually going out there and working to get people on the ballot, if this is what they're going to have to come up against. So, yeah, I mean, it was, again, very clearly and deliberately calculated in a misleading or fraudulent manner to get people to pull their names off. And so that's occurring in parallel to what we've been dealing with here with the State Board of Elections. And we expect at some point, of course, that we will have to deal with the Democratic Party and the Elias Law Firm in court as well, because I'm sure they will come in with their own challenges against our certification as a party and then my candidacy.
Oh, so so this battle is going to continue on until, gosh, now, I know back east here, there's different times where you vote, like it'll be in the fall, but for the primary, is it August 23rd back east? Is that right? The right date?
We already in North Carolina, we already had our primary, but because we were seeking to be certified as a new party, we don't participate in the primary this first year. So what we do is after we are certified, we have a nominating convention, and then in subsequent years. So we are certified. If we're certified this year, then in 2024 we would hold a primary like the other established parties in North Carolina, the Democrats, the Republicans, and the Libertarians.
Okay. As far as I had asked you before about the Pennsylvania, do you see so it sounds like some of the same players are involved. Right. So does this go to the highest point, do you think, of the Democratic National Committee, or is this a regional DCC where it's, and for listeners that may not know that acronym, that's the Democratic Congressional, I forget, Committee, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Campaign. Yeah. No, this does go. It goes to the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, the DSCC, which, has Mitch McConnell. I'm sorry, Chuck Schumer as its head. I guess they're at times they can be interchangeable.
Yeah. I think he'd be okay, but it's Chuck Schumer that would not be. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things that is troubling about this is how partisan the whole thing has been. The number of Republicans who want to come to our aid now, the fact that the certification hearing on Thursday was so openly and clearly partisan, in the fact the way the Republicans were making arguments for us, with arguments, of course, that I agreed with. But I know that if we were the Libertarians or the Constitution Party or some independent candidate who viewed himself as conservative, that the roles would have been reversed. And the Democrats would have been arguing for us and the Republicans against. I mean, so this is much more about something other than just the Democratic Party. This is about the whole corrupt nature, the whole exclusionary nature, the whole undemocratic nature of the two-party system. And certainly, yes, we can see in Pennsylvania, currently there's a court case in Illinois right now where an independent candidate, they did the same thing to him. He got the signatures necessary to get on the ballot. The Democratic Party came in, did similar tactics, got a couple thousand people to remove their names from the petition, and now he's below the threshold required. In Montana, this occurred in 2020, and certainly go back and you find this over and over again. So this is again, like I said, this is not surprising. It might be a little startling to see the beast in how it appears, but this is the reality of our two-party system, and it will do everything it can to keep anyone out who threatens the donor base of that two-party system. Yeah, right. I mean, this is not about keeping me off the ballot. It's not about keeping the Green Party off the ballot. This is about keeping representation of working families off the ballot. This is about keeping issues off the ballot that threaten, that are a danger to the big money donors of the Democratic and Republican Party, right? I mean, this is, if we're not on the ballot, there's no one talking about healthcare, about affordable housing, about action on the climate, on living wages, on ending the war on drugs, right? All these things that are a real threat to the corporate donors of the Republicans and Democrats. We represent that threat. And so it's not about us, it's about the people we represent whose issues those belong to.
And you know, speaking of which, as far as media coverage, one of the things that, you know, that really surprised me, I guess it shouldn't, but it did, because I continually am shocked by how craven our corporate media is. But I've noticed there's not a lot of coverage about, and it seems like this would be a big issue considering how much airtime, like you mentioned before, they're giving to January 6th and to the Republicans.
Right.
And
Yeah.
So has there been any besides local North Carolina coverage, or has there even been that?
We have gotten local North Carolina coverage. We've gotten some really
Okay.
good local North Carolina coverage, and I'm very appreciative and grateful for that. I think part of that was just as we worked hard to get that relationship with the local media before this happened. So we have a trusted relationship with a lot, but there's also other local media that haven't even looked at us, that have taken the State Board of Elections press statement about this and just said, okay, this is the truth, you know, and just been dutiful stenographers. Now, in terms of a national level interest, yes, we've gotten some great coverage by, you know, folks like you, and then folks who host podcasts and YouTube platforms, and, you know, I mean, and so we're getting this out to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. But if you're talking about, has the New York Times called us? Has CNN expressed any interest? No, not at all. And, you know, we have contacted various outlets like that, but have heard nothing back.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting how they pick and choose what is supposed to be relevant news. Right. Well, you know, for the listeners that have tuned in, because we have quite a few, Reef, do you have any questions or comments from people from audience that have tuned in? I've been listening for a few minutes. And you have to unmute your mic, Reef.
Yeah, that would work too. So how is what the Democrats have done not a federal crime, from John McCarthy? Seems like a pretty decent question.
Do you have an answer to that? Is it a federal crime? It's FEC. It's
I think, and that's something that we're going to pursue, and there are a variety of options here for us, whether it be legal, administrative, or political. And I think we're going to probably pursue all three. I can't speak to what we're going to do specifically at this point. When we act on that, then we will let people know what we are doing. But certainly there will be legal challenges to this. And there is the opportunity for people who have been aggrieved, petition signers, to file civil lawsuits in this as well against the State Board of Elections and others who interfered in their constitutional right to petition the government. There's that's a long history to that constitutional right. Kind of goes back to the late 18th century, right? I mean, so you have that. We have that option. We have a variety of options where right now we are discussing what is the best way forward for this, what's the most productive, and also what's the best in terms of our timeline. We do have a issue where the state has already clearly said that they will be printing ballots in mid-August. So we have basically a 6-week window to get on the ballot. My understanding is that when it comes to ballot printing, the courts usually side with the states. I might be wrong with that, but I think generally the courts tend to side with the state in terms of comes to, we have to print the ballots and proof them and then get them out by, you know, such and such a date for absentee ballots. So we do have that deadline. And if I were the Democrats, whether they be with Elias Law Firm, the DSCC, the State Board of Elections, Governor Cooper's office, whoever it may be, my goal would be to make sure this process takes 6 weeks. So set up obstacle after obstacle. So if we win in court, appeal it. If we win that appeal, then file a challenge through an outside party like Elias that will put us back into court. If we win that, then find another way to challenge and try and run the clock out. This is something that they do. We see them do this, they being the Democratic Party, and the Republican Party does it as well to those, we've got this inane understanding of our political system. And I say it all the time, left, right. So I'm as guilty as participating in it because it's simple. It's part of our grammar now. It's how we think.
Right.
It's very Orwellian, right? I mean, in the sense of like, right, controlling how we view things based on our language.
Right.
And, this idea of it's a left-right axis. So, and I had this conversation today because in 2016, there was a libertarian candidate in North Carolina who received 100,000 votes, which if in the way it is explained, if those votes had gone to the Republican candidate, the incumbent governor, he would have won, the incumbent governor would have won re-election. But because a libertarian stole 100,000 votes, and the whole argument is inane, because that libertarian ran on ending the war on drugs. That libertarian ran on marriage equality. That libertarian ran on trans rights. That libertarian ran on a host of things that are anathema to the Republican Party, just as we as Greens run on a host of issues that are completely antagonistic and vile to the Democratic Party. The idea of people having the health care they deserve as a human right is anathema to the Democratic Party. So, we run into those arguments as well, but like the idea that we are a threat to the system and those who profit from the system is what inspires them to do everything they can to keep us out and to create these types of obstacles, hurdles. And of course, their last line of defense will be that mid-August ballot printing, as far as I can tell.
And that brings me to ask you to educate the audience a little bit about you and your platform. First of all, what got you into North Carolina politics, and into your community and what's going on, and what, if you could highlight some of the things that are different from the Democratic Party with the Green Party in your particular district that are focused right now. So if you
give your
platform a bit.
Yeah. Thanks. So I got into politics. I was in the Marine Corps. I was in the State Department. I took part in the wars, and I regret that. I'm ashamed of that. And in 2009, when I was at the State Department, I resigned. I was in Afghanistan. And I resigned in protest over the escalation of the Afghan war in 2009, and that put me into the anti-war community. I ended up joining a think tank in Washington, D.C., one of the few non-corporate think tanks, where we were anti-war, for a just foreign policy, pro-human rights, so very much different than most of the other think tanks in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And
definitely not the Hudson Institute.
No, not Brookings, not Carnegie, not, any of those, AEI or any of that stuff. So we, so that, and at that same time too, as I worked at that level, at the congressional level, at the, DC suit and tie, nonsense level. I also became very involved as an activist, working with Veterans for Peace and Code Pink, and working on the ground, having putting my body into it, taking part in actions, a lot of experience that way as well. And really understanding what a movement needs to be successful. I'm down here in North Carolina and, still doing that work. At that point, at about this time last year, the North Carolina Green Party reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you like to run for federal office?" And it wasn't anything I had thought about. And I said, yeah, sure. So I had affiliated with the North Carolina Green Party. I had joined the Greens as my first political party I'd ever been a part of. I had never been a part of the Democratic Party, never been part of the Republican Party. I've been voting third party for since 2012. And it was a natural home for me. I am in agreement on the issues. I am a socialist. I believe the two-party system is corrupt and undemocratic, and it's harmful. That if you look at an event like January 6th, January 6th comes out of the two-party system. When you have identity politics where 40 to 50% of Democrats say Republicans are evil, and an equivalent number of Republicans are saying Democrats are evil, and both parties utilize that demonization to try and win elections, you're going to have events like January 6th. And I think it will only get worse unless we break the duopoly, right? Unless we go to a multi-party system that abandons this identity politics, this red versus blue framing, and goes to an issues-based electoral system. In terms of what I identify with the Green Party is, one, the need for more direct democracy, strengthening our democracy, making it more inclusive, broadening it. I also believe that climate change is existential, that we are getting hit, as the United Nations says, harder and faster than anyone expected, and that what is coming will break us as a society. And this ties in then to other aspects of our platform, the need for an economic bill of rights, which is included in our Green New Deal. Our Green New Deal dates back to about 2006 and is not the corporate washed Green New Deal that Democrats present. But there is an economic bill of rights in there that could stand alone on its own. And that economic bill of rights is based upon the idea that healthcare, housing, education, and jobs are human rights. And we can get into all the aspects of that. But for healthcare, you're talking about single payer universal care that eventually leads to a national health service. With housing as a human right, you're talking about things such as rent control, first right of refusal for tenants to buy the property they're renting in, a public banking system to allow working families to purchase homes, not allowing corporations to purchase homes, et cetera, right? I mean, jobs, you're talking about annualized living wages, a job guarantee, education, of course, education available to everyone at no cost from pre-K all the way through to, I want to become a rocket scientist. So that's in a nutshell. We're also against the wars overseas. We're against the crime against humanity that's happening at our border. We're against the war on drugs, and then we can go into much, certainly issues of racial justice, LGBTQIA rights, so I think if you understand that articulation of who we are, you can see how when we say that if we're not on the ballot, those issues are not going to be addressed. Those issues are going to be left out. I don't know how you can listen to what I just said and think that somehow that applies to the Democratic Party as it exists. Yeah, there are a few great voices. There are a few great shining stars on the left in a Democratic Party, but look at the evidence of how the Democratic Party actually performs and what they have done and what you can expect them to do, and you can understand how we are a clear alternative to them.
Right. But the other thing that's been done to the Green Party too is the Russophobia has come in. And of course, like Bill Stein was called a Russian asset.
Yeah.
Actually, I've been called that because I came forward about my history with Joe Biden. So I was immediately called a Russian asset. Right. And so anyone that disagrees with the platform is, I don't know, like you're put in that category. And for some reason, people accept it. I don't know why. It mystifies me to this point, that propagandized kind of approach. But what I wanted to ask,
I think, Tara, it's part of the identity politic process that you are part of the other, right? I mean, you are a threat. You are someone who is a danger to me and my group. Right. So it is the idea that you are, and I mean, and using the Russians is not anything new. I mean, using the Russians has been a very successful tactic among Americans and Europeans for decades now. In the United States for 100 years.
Yeah.
I mean, and for the British, this goes back. I mean, you can go back to what they were arguing about in Parliament in the 1850s, and one side is calling the other pawns of the Tsar. I mean, this is a very effective strategy. Right. That has, and they use it because it is effective, and doesn't mean it's true or has any value to it or has any decency behind it, but it's effective. So they utilize it.
Well, just recently I saw some headlines that were talking about the war, and you, since you are a veteran, when you're looking at the buildup that we're looking at towards a global conflict, and this looks like it could be ground and everything else, and they're even throwing in rhetoric about a limited nuclear war. What are some of your thoughts about the rhetoric that you're hearing from the State Department, from where you used to work, and from some people probably that you even know formally? What is your thought? Like, what's going on, and why are they trying to normalize nuclear war like that? That's just, it's absurd, actually.
It's madness, and it will lead to our extinction. A friend of mine says we're perpetually in 2020. We could be dead from climate change in 20 years, or we can be dead from nuclear war in 20 minutes. And the arrogance. Look, I saw this. I saw this with the military, the State Department, with CIA guys, the arrogance that somehow, even though the wars we were taking part in Iraq and Afghanistan, later in Syria and Yemen and Libya, when historical examples we put in front of them saying like, look, it didn't work then. Why do you think it's going to work now? It didn't work in Vietnam. It didn't work in Central America. It didn't work in the Caribbean. It didn't work in the Philippines. Why do you think it's going to work now? The arrogance was simply the answer for that. And so there's an arrogance here. I think what you're seeing in Ukraine, I don't know how anyone can divorce that from the rest of the militarism that has existed for decades. We can just make it easy. We'll call a starting point the Cold War, end of the Cold War, just to make it easy, right? But we can go further back than that. But certainly the idea that you can divorce somehow this war in Ukraine from all the other wars is just nonsensical. I don't know how the same people in charge for the Americans and the British and the Europeans were the same people in charge of the Iraq war, the Afghan war, the war in Libya. And these are the same people over and over again. They might be Republican, they might be Democrats, but what they encompass are two things. One, it's a megalomania, and so when I look at the war in Ukraine, I say this is the result of megalomania from Washington, D.C., from London, from Moscow. These are the people who have taken power and want to exert that power to benefit themselves. And if that's just for their egos or for the idea that somehow the map needs to be in the shade of color that they want it to be, like a game of Risk, that's what they're going to do. And of course, the other thing too for Ukraine is, the commerce, the trade, particularly the energy, again, the liquid natural gas that the United States wants to sell to Europe and is now selling to Europe. So this war is an incredibly dirty war in Ukraine. It's no different than the other wars we've been involved. And I think that's something for people to see that clear connection. And it's about megalomania and about making money for profits.
I would go further. I think it's money laundering as well. I think that there's money laundering going on. Now this is my opinion, but I think that some of the elite Democrat officials are involved with laundering their own money, including Biden, including Pelosi, including some of these people that have connections and have had them since 2014. And Victoria Nuland, it was like known to be a coup. And, many people that I talked to have said that this war didn't start February 23rd. This war started in 2014. I mean, what are your thoughts on that kind of?
Oh, absolutely. And it starts before then. I mean, it really does start before then with the color revolutions and everything else. And but 2014, I think, is a day to start it. Or is a date to utilize because of what occurs there, what occurs with the coup, what occurs, with how Russia responds to that coup. I don't think there's any argument you're not going to get an argument from me about what Russia does. I mean, what Russia does in 2014 response to that coup is what you would expect someone like Vladimir Putin to do. You stage a coup, you threaten his position in Ukraine, he's going to put troops into Crimea, and he's going to put troops into eastern Ukraine. And I mean, you're going to continue the idea that somehow he wasn't going to push back. This idea that somehow we were going to push him so hard that he was going to say, oh, I give up. And then we see over these last 8 years that continual pushing that finally results in the invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022, which, yeah, exactly. If you bring up any type of context, if you bring up the fact that, the war began prior to February 2022, that, 15,000 people died there before that in the fighting, you're called a Putin sympathizer. You're called, a Kremlin shill.
Right.
just for trying to bring up the context, the nuance, the history. I mean, I dealt with this with the Afghan war, with trying to talk to people about the Afghan war, and their refusal to acknowledge that Afghanistan had been in war since the late 70s because the war had to have started on September 11th. And the consequence of that type of framing, of that, of allowing only that narrative, of having only that historical understanding, was the ruin of Afghanistan over these last 20 years, the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, and then, of course, now, as we see, Taliban control once again in Afghanistan, because for many reasons of ego and megalomania again, the United States did what it did in Afghanistan for not just 20 years, but goes back really to the late 70s.
And you're in the heat of this, in the sense that for your political race, we're coming up on they're using the Roe v. Wade again, like they have Democrats have again and again and again. The Republicans use it too for their own purposes in a different way, but they are really going after voters. I think they raised, I read 80 million. Is that right? The Democratic Party did?
That's what I saw. Yeah.
I don't understand that. And the whole thing about voting harder, I don't get either. But
the argument that this time we're really, the last 50 years.
This time we really mean it.
Yeah. We're
really going to pretend to codify it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. We're really going to do it this time. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, and you're also a veteran. So when we're talking about war, like Biden again had one of his slips and basically said we were at war, even though Congress hasn't declared war and there's not an official war. Well, we've given $54 billion to Ukraine in weapons, and then another 800 million last week is going to Ukraine, plus whatever NATO's giving, and then so on, and then so on and so forth.
Right, and we're paying the salaries of the Ukrainian army. Or to a large extent, we're paying their salaries. So when you're paying the salaries of somebody's army who's at war, that's your war. It's that clear. Yeah, it's that clear. And by no means does this mean that somehow I'm not condemning what Russia's done. I condemn all sides in the war. The only side I take in that war is for the people who are suffering, the people who are, the victims of this, very similar what, when I look at this, and a lot of other people say the same thing, this reminds you of, 1914 Europe, and the beginnings of the First World War. Right. And this type of brinksmanship, this types of it's framed as some type of geopolitical stratagems, but when the reality is, it's just the same people trying to have more money and more power.
Well, and Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, their profits, I think, have quadrupled or even more so in the last 90 days, obviously, because of this. So it's trying to figure out a way to make it so that there isn't a monetary incentive in the marketplace for war. And that's the crux of this, the greed, because as long as there's an incentive for war and not peace, how do you, as citizens, how do you fight for peace if we can't get the ruling class to get on board? Right.
And, what I've been saying about my purposes in going into the U.S. Senate is to deny them that. A U.S. senator has a lot of power, there's a lot of mechanisms for one lone U.S. senator, as we have seen, to cause delays, to cause things not to move forward, to just be a major roadblock to what they want to be. And I can pledge, and I've said this over and over again, if I'm in the Senate, they're not getting their $15 billion aircraft carriers. They're not as long as our people aren't getting health care. Right? Yeah. Not as long as our rent is going up 20%. ExxonMobil and Chevron and BP are not getting tens of billions of dollars in fossil fuel subsidies. They're not. I mean, that's my pledge. I will go to the Senate. I'm not there to make any friends. If I had a desire to do well in politics in the sense of getting there and then, abandoning my principles, I would just start it off with the Democratic Party. But instead, I'm with the Green Party because I'm doing this because I see the suffering of people I love because of deliberate government policies of the last 50 years. I have too many people in my life who check their bank accounts before they decide whether to call their doctors. Right. I mean, that happens over and over. I know too many people who've overdosed because we have a war on drugs that treats people with substance abuse issues as criminals rather than treating it as a public health issue. I know too many people who are dealing with the consequences of some nonviolent drug crime from 15 years ago that is continuing to ruin their life and causing enormous stress and strain and horror on their family. I mean, I got a neighbor here, parole officer shows up, guy's got a gun and everything, and he's got to stand there in front of his young kids and talk to this parole officer. For what? A nonviolent drug charge a bunch of years ago. And we can go on. We could talk about all kinds of other issues in terms of fact that nearly 2/3 of Americans are now reporting they're living paycheck to paycheck, right? That totally redefines what the working class is. We're entering into a new and we have been, ever since, I date this back to say Nixon taking us off the gold standard, but this has been my entire life, 50 years or so of deliberate economic policies that have squeezed everything to the top, everything to the top. And people are suffering and people are dying because of this. And so that's my purpose in doing this. Achieve some accountability, get some justice, and maybe, just maybe, allow the same conditions that have allowed the banks to get bigger, the corporations to get bigger, the wealthy to get wealthier. Maybe, just maybe, some degree of fairness that allows workers to have that same level of support from their government.
Yeah, and while we're on, some of the domestic policies that you're trying to enact and trying to further, I wanted to talk to you for a minute about the climate, because as you said, that's an existential threat. And, just within the last couple of weeks, because of the high fuel prices, which are, it's sort of the, this has been created actually by the Biden administration. Inflation was already starting before the conflict in Ukraine, right? But then it really got worse. So now you're hearing about they're going to open up federal lands for drilling. Some of the places where they made campaign promises, how they were going to move to renewable energy. Now they're trying to backtrack, and the whole Green New Deal. But yet you still see progressive Democrats like AOC and other ones still behind Biden, even though they had said their excuse, right? Like her excuse for not dealing with what happened to me. I was a staffer. Was one of the things was, well, she had to get that Green New Deal through, right? Green New Deal. Well, it didn't go through, and it's not going to go through. So what are your thoughts on that, on the Green New Deal kind of fiction, which I think is at this point a fiction? Where are we and where can we go?
Well, it's getting to the point, and I don't want to be glib about this, but maybe the best thing to do is try and build a time machine and go back 30 or 40 years and do the things that we should have been doing. Look, this energy crisis we're in right now, this gas crisis, where people are people are spending half, 2/3 of a day's pay to fill up their vehicles. Like you're driving to work and then you're taking your kids to karate and, all the other things, right? Yeah. You're filling your car up once a week. If you're making $15-20 an hour, that's going to take away a good chunk of a day's pay from you. So this is really exhaustive to people who are already struggling. But it is not.
And it raises food prices, because look at, I went into my market here. I live in rural Oregon area. A head of lettuce, it was an organic head of lettuce that was local, but it still had to be shipped, $7 almost. So prices are just so $5 to $7 for a head of lettuce. It's insane.
It is, and a lot of that food price increase, there was a little bit of reporting on this last fall, not a lot, but I think Bloomberg and a few others did. A lot of that food price increase is tied to the climate. The fact that we have these wildfires, these droughts, these floods that have just devastated large parts of our crops, our yields in the West. Well, when you have that, when you have a reduction in crop yield like we're experiencing because of issues of climate, all your food's going to go up in price, particularly if you're talking about animal products, because most of our agriculture goes to feeding the animals that we then slaughter and then eat. This is a real issue. This is affecting us now. We're seeing how it's destroying communities, and we know it's going to get worse. Whether it's the frequency, the intensity, we know it's going to get worse. And so one of the aspects of the Green New Deal is, besides the idea of rebuilding our energy infrastructure, which is something we could have done if we had chosen to do so. National Priorities Project. I think folks are familiar with the number that we spent $7 trillion directly on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan over 20 years. All told, we spent $14 trillion on wars in the Pentagon and the military, but just directly for the Iraq and Afghan wars, we spent $7 trillion. Well, the National Priorities Project looked at this and they said, what if we had, rather than go to war in Iraq and Afghanistan for 20 years, done the Green New Deal? And what they found was that over the 20 years, we would have built out that energy network, that clean energy network, that renewable energy network, all the benefits that come to it, including high paying jobs, but also too, it wouldn't have cost $7 trillion. It would have cost $5 trillion. Right? It would have been cheaper. I mean, so just the lost opportunity costs of our decisions. But one of the things as we look at this is we say, this is where the Economic Bill of Rights ties into the Green New Deal. People are struggling now. People are suffering. You're seeing the effects that we're having on our economy due to, say, high food prices.
Right.
That's only going to continue. Look, in North Carolina, I meet climate refugees. I meet folks from California who say, I can't handle the fires any longer. I'm moving east. I've met here. I mean, a couple of friends of mine.
So they just can't handle the wild being evacuated constantly. It's horrible.
Right. And so you have other issues of just a stick on migration, because we can talk about a host of things of what the climate collapse is going to do to our societal infrastructure, our economic infrastructure. Right. On the coastline here in North Carolina, it's estimated that anywhere from 25 to 50 coastal communities will have to be abandoned in 30 years. Because of sea level, yes. Because people, I think most people aren't familiar with the idea that, look, to be forced to abandon your community because of sea level rise doesn't mean that the water has to be above your house. Your sharks have to be swimming through your front door or anything like that, right? It just have to be. You have to have, I don't know, a dozen. 24 days a year where you have an inch of salt water on your, flooding you to destroy your infrastructure, destroy your homes, make your community unlivable, right? Yeah. Where are those people going to go when that happens? What is going to happen to the economy of that area? How are we going to absorb that? North Carolina, say, our Outer Banks, which are some of the best beaches in the world. Yes. How are we going to make up for that in terms of just economics? When I was in Elizabeth City, which is one of our coastal communities, and they're about 8 feet above sea level. They're planning for this already. They're going to have to pick up their downtown and move it 300, 400 yards. How are they going to do that? How are they going to afford to do that? Right. I mean, you're talking about issues like that how are we going to pay for all this? And where are these people going to find jobs? Where are they going to find homes? And so this is why the Economic Bill of Rights ties into a Green New Deal, because what is coming is much more than the fact that we're going to get bigger hurricanes more often, that we're going to see these wildfires are going to set records every year, that we're going to have record-setting droughts, et cetera, that we're going to have floods in communities that never had floods before. Of course, all that's going to happen. However, what does that mean for our societal infrastructure in terms of migration, in terms of economics, in terms of just, how communities are structured? And that's why if we understand it as we should, as this climate collapse is occurring and it's only going to get worse, well, we better start doing something about it right now. And, I'm afraid, of course, what we're seeing, as you said, you get lip service from some Democrats, but, that's all it's really amounted to. And, Joe Biden.
There's some good tweets.
There's some great tweets, and but then we also see another holiday weekend where, as they're heading out the door on a Friday, the Biden administration's like, "Hey, we're going to open up more offshore drilling."
Yeah. By the way.
Yeah. By the way.
Because and then of course they've expanded certain with Homeland Security, they've expanded the definition of what a terrorist is, so that if you're a political activist that is against offshore oil drilling or against some of these things that are going to be happening, you could be deemed, an environmental terrorist or whatever. If you're into animal rights, or if you're into, and you want people to start using, not using animal products and I don't know. It's really it's an interesting time, but I feel like our action as individual citizens is a little behind what collectively what they've already been doing in the government to prep for any kind of, resistance, right, against some of this.
Well, we have a government. We have a government
Yeah.
that's meant to, again, help the richest prosper. Again, I mean, deliberate policies, and so this idea that somehow they're going to amend that to protect the population and the planet is just, I mean, you're living in fantasy land if you think that all of a sudden they're just going to change the way they've been acting since, ever, basically,
Right.
without some type of mass movement. And, politics is one aspect of that. We do have to have a mass movement. I think what we saw 2 years ago with the George Floyd protests is the beginning of that. What we're seeing with the labor organizing right now is the beginning. I think the change in technology that have allowed for people like yourself to have platforms like this, where you're able to talk to people, educate people, inform people, communicate, and build connections. I mean, this is, I think, another aspect of that we have to really concentrate on. Like the political party aspect is just one arm of the appendage. That's it. Just one part of this. And the danger being, if you have a political party that exists for its own purposes, well, you get what we have now, right? I think ultimately what I always come back to is what Cornel West says, that we are living at the intersection of might makes right and greed is good. And if you understand that, you understand what we're up against. And you understand that the only way to change that is to take hold of it and force it to change. It's not going to change on its own. These people who are in power, the Democrats, Republicans, who will give lip service to the climate, and the Republicans won't even do that, they believe they're going to be okay. They believe that they're gonna be the recipients of that squeezing everything to the top. That as long as might makes right and greed is good is alive and well in the United States, they will be okay. And that's what we have to make them understand, is that no, they will not be okay.
Yeah, and I don't even know if they're staying. Remember, they're making their rocket ships to go to Mars. Like 3 of them did, right? Their phallic-shaped rocket ships and went off, Bezos and Musk and them. Yeah, that's their solution. We're just gonna trash this planet. Let's go.
Yeah, go trash another one. Yeah.
And, of course they'll. Yeah, but as far as the Green Party goes, I just was hoping that you could share with people that have tuned in or listening ways that they can support you, find out more about your work, and more about the Green Party in general, and the struggle ahead, so to speak.
Yeah, thank you. My website for the campaign is MatthewHoh4Senate.org. Last name spelled H-O-H, 4 is F-O-R. So MatthewHoh4Senate.org. Please go and donate. We need your assistance. We are up against the Democratic Party machine. We're up against their biggest law firm. They see us as a threat. The only way we win is with the support of thousands of people. Thousands of people have already supported us, but we need more, because we are up against the Democratic Party machine here. So if you agree with what I'm saying, if you agree that we need to tear down the duopoly and take hold of it and build something new, please go to MatthewHoh4Senate.org. Please donate. And if you'd like to volunteer, we can use folks in a variety of ways. And you don't really even need to be in North Carolina, because we can put you to work doing other things from outside of North Carolina. So please, that your help will get us the victory that we need in order to inspire and start other victories. I mean, because this is we're building on what people have done before. I don't want to step on any toes. We're building what plenty of people have done before, and others will come after us. And then, as I said just before, please support shows like this. This is a key aspect of what we're trying to do here. I mean, we talk about labor organizing, we talk about mutual aid, we talk about political parties, we talk about civil disobedience and direct action, right? Talk about mobilizing people. One of the things that covers all of that is communication, is education, is information. And we have the technology now where we don't have to try and go on CNN in order to communicate to people. We don't have to rely on the New York Times to tell our story. We can get this out to millions of people if we continue to build shows like yours, Tara, that enable people to come on and communicate the reality of the situation to people who know the reality of the situation because they're suffering under it, and that communication then allows us to work together and to defeat, this two-party system.
Well, thank you. And well said, well put. And there you have it. I think too that, as people are tuning in, listening, and comments that I've gotten over the past couple of weeks, people are feeling overwhelmed, and they're also feeling as citizens, like, what can they do? So I like what you're giving people options. There's action items that they can do, because there's nothing worse than just feeling helpless, like you're just sort of a pawn in this very complicated game that the power elites are playing, because really it only benefits them. And so before you, because I know I've kept you here for a little while, but we have a few more minutes. I just wanted to ask you, so what are the next steps right now for you as far as moving forward with your campaign? Are you able to move forward? Are you still waiting for some legal things to sort out, or where is it in this particular time?
Yes, we're moving forward. We are beginning the process of taking some actions to get our rightful place onto the ballot. If if they thought that I or other folks involved in this were the kind of people who were just going to let this go, they obviously didn't read our bios. They don't know who they're dealing with here. You know, I mean, I think it's same prior for you. They probably didn't know who they were dealing with. And they brought the full weight. They ended up bringing the full weight of what they could on top of you. But that's really a credit to you, because that's what they had to do in order to try and silence you and crush you. And you haven't given up. You're here doing this. You're inspiring others. You're communicating the reality of our political system to, thousands, millions of people. And, the same thing too. I think what it is more and more people are rising to the occasion because they see the courage like that you present, Tara, and they say, this is bullshit. What they did to her. All she tried to do was get some justice. All she tried to do was tell the truth. And look what they did to her. And then they can see that, in their lives. They can see it in their neighborhoods. They can see the reality of the system we live under. And so it's that type of coming together, communicating, working together, building, and for us, to answer your question again, we're in the process now of doing what we need to do to make sure we're on the ballot in November. And again, another pitch for, we need help, we need money, we need lawyers, we need that kind of thing. So, but certainly if people can support us, please do.
All right. Any lawyers out there too, as well. And, that can really help with that, because I think that's kind of the name of the game particularly with election law. But I think the more people know about your story, and I felt really strongly about uplifting it, because I just feel like a lot of people don't even know what happened to the Green Party during the 2020 election, and all the, there was a lot of, trickery used by DNC to not give that. And voters deserve to have choices, and that's the whole thing. It's not sustainable to keep going with this duopoly, obviously, because our country's suffering. So so thank you for what you're doing. And in our live stream here in Rockfin and YouTube, we have your links underneath. So audience members, you know how to do that. Please like and subscribe this stream however many times you want to on Rockfin and YouTube. And YouTube's been pretty good. They took down a few of my videos a couple weeks ago for whatever reason. I appealed, got them back up, except for one, ironically, about censorship. But I keep trying. But like many content creators and many people out there doing this work, it's whack-a-mole a bit, where we get something up and then it gets taken down. But and for you now, it's with politics. It's just that there's so much at play when you're in the middle of an election, and then some trickery happens like that. I'm sorry that you are going through that. Yeah. So,
but, look, if you weren't a threat, if you weren't speaking honestly, if you weren't a danger, they wouldn't censor you. They would just ignore you. It goes back to the what Gandhi said, right? First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. And you're in the third phase right now, and you will win, and we will win. And
and you will win. Yes,
absolutely.
And we'll make sure of it. So everyone, please check out the websites that are listed below in the links, and follow them and share. And thank you so much. It was lovely to have you. And
absolutely. I really appreciate this, and thank you for what you've done and what you continue to do.
Yeah, and let's have you back on so we can find out the progress of this.
Please.
We got to know the ending. All right. And so there you have it, everyone. Thank you for joining. And please tune in next time. Next Monday, we'll be back. And I think we're going to have Wyatt Reade, the journalist on, investigative journalist. In the meantime, stay safe and take care.